Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Himes, and I'm on the faculty here at Boston College in the theology department. I am one of the co-organizers of this conference, along with Dr. Kate Ward, and with the invaluable assistance of Ms. Tony Ross, the Associate Director of the Jesuit Institute, as well as receiving the support of Father Jim Keenan, the Director of the Institute. Earlier this afternoon, we began this conference with a series of concurrent sessions that involve panels of BC faculty, as well as grad students and undergraduates from a variety of institutions. We hope you will join us in our conversation on campus today and tomorrow on the theme of Growing Apart, the Implications of Economic Inequality. Following this plenary session, there will be a second round of panels beginning at 4:30 that I encourage you to attend. Those sessions and all other conference activities tomorrow will be held in Stokes Hall. Tomorrow there will be two more plenary sessions. Beginning at 9 a.m., Professor Victor Tan Chen of Virginia Commonwealth University will speak to the conference theme from the perspective of a sociologist. Then there will be a third round of concurrent panels in mid-morning with faculty, grad students, and undergraduates delivering remarks. To close the conference, we will hear from Father Sachi George of Bangalore, India, who is a visiting scholar here at BC this semester. Father Sachi will provide an ethical and developing world perspective on our conference theme. That final session will begin at 12:15 tomorrow. I encourage you to go to our website for specific information about the conference schedule. What I'd also ask now is, if you haven't, would you please silence your cell phones? It is my pleasant task now to introduce Dr. David E. Quigley, who has served as Provost and Dean of Faculties here at Boston College since 2014. Prior to that, David was Dean of the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. David came to BC in 1998 as a member of the History Department. A graduate of Amherst College with a doctorate from New York University, David Quigley has been one of the academic leaders at Boston College for many, many years. In 2007, he was the recipient of the university-wide Distinguished Teaching Award. It is a pleasure to welcome to the stage our Provost, David Quigley, who will introduce our distinguished guests.
Thanks so much, Ken, for that generous introduction, and also for the work that you and your faculty seminar have done in pulling together today's events, this weekend's events, and the year-long faculty conversation about inequality. On behalf of Father William P. Leahy, the president of Boston College, and our faculty, it's a great pleasure to have so many of you, members of the BC community and colleagues from around the Boston area, here to take stock as we think about growing apart, the implications of economic inequality. From our neighborhoods and local institutions to our national polity and culture, as we think around the world at this moment and going forward, it's dawned on many of us, some earlier, some just recently, that one of perhaps the great moral questions of the age is both the challenge of inequality in terms of lived experience, but also the linked and in some ways even graver concern that we don't have language to grapple with the causes, the experiences, and the implications of that inequality, which is such the defining feature of these first decades of the 21st century. Again, many wonderful speakers. You heard about a number of them over the last few minutes, but it's my distinct pleasure to speak for the Boston College community as we welcome today's keynote speaker. There's been no more eloquent or insistent voice in our national politics in this decade, reminding us of the important strain in American political life, the egalitarian tradition in American politics, And it's appropriate that the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, building on the grand tradition for a 19th century historian like me, Charles Sumner in the era of the Civil War and Reconstruction, in more recent times, Teddy Kennedy, former trustee of Boston College, Senator Elizabeth Warren, throughout her career in academics, in public life, as she's moved around the country, as she's emerged as a national leader, reminding us of the call towards greater justice, greater attention to the egalitarian tradition in America. I first came across Senator Warren nearly 3 decades ago when a close friend was studying in a different law school in another city at the University of Pennsylvania and raved about the quality of his teacher, who was a specialist in bankruptcy law. Over the last 3 decades, first in academic circles and over time more and more consistently in the public life of my home city of Cambridge, around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and across the country, I and so many of us here today have had the pleasure of hearing Senator Warren emerge ever more forcefully as one of the great voices in contemporary American life, again reminding us of the important democratic, moral, egalitarian traditions which are too often diminished and forgotten in our public life. Again, could go on quite a bit, knowing that so many of you are not here to listen to a provost, but rather to our speaker. Let me just close with one last reminder. I don't think it's for nothing that this is not the state of Massachusetts, but a reminder of the Commonwealth, that sense of a calling towards a common life, a common sense of prosperity, and a common responsibility to all, especially the most vulnerable in our society. And there is no greater voice in American life to remind us of the call to those around us and to our egalitarian sense of collective self than Senator Elizabeth Warren. Please join me in welcoming Senator Warren to Boston College.
So it's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. It is good to be on a college campus. That's where I like to be. So thank you very much, David, for the very generous introduction. I also want to thank Father Leahy and Father Himes for the invitation to be here. I also have a special thank you for Boston College. 2 people who helped me do my work in the United States Senate are BC grads. Chris Lang, who does work here in the Massachusetts office, and Ricardo Sanchez, who is in the Washington office. And all I can say is, based on my sample, you can always tell a stat nerd, right? Based on my sample, BC helps people develop both good brains and good hearts. And for me, that's what a first-rate education is all about. So thank you, BC. Thank you, BC. You bet. So this conference is spotlighting some really important economic issues, and I'm really glad to have a chance to talk with you about them. You know, there's been a lot of good news about the economy recently. The unemployment rate is now below 5%. We've had 72 straight months of private sector job growth. Corporate profits are up, and after some bumps earlier in the year, the stock market is rising again. On many different statistical measures, the economy has improved, and it is continuing to improve. And I think that the president and his team deserve credit for the steps they have taken to get us here. We should stop and say that, especially the job growth part of this. It's a big deal. But I have spent most of my career studying what's happening to America's middle class. And while some of these very widely cited statistics give an important snapshot about the success of the overall economy, they don't tell us much about what is happening at the ground level to tens of millions of Americans. And here is the hard truth. Despite the cheery top-line numbers, America's middle class is in deep trouble. Think about it this way. If the stock market has soared in recent years, that is great if you have a good pension or you have a lot of money in a mutual fund. But if you and your husband or wife are both working full-time with kids in school, and you are among the half of all Americans who don't have a single dollar in stocks, then a booming stock market just looks like a train that is leaving the station while you are standing on the platform. Corporate profits and GDP have risen. But if you work full-time at Walmart and you are paid so little that you need food stamps and a second job to make ends meet, then more money in the pockets of stockholders and an uptick in the GDP does not put groceries on your table. Unemployment numbers have been dropping. But if you're working part-time because you can't find full-time work, or if you've given up because you can't find a decent job to replace the one you lost, you may be counted as part of that drop in unemployment. But how much celebrating are you going to do? Inflation rates are still low. But what comfort is it if you're young and starting out life with tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, you're locked into high interest rates, you're unable to find a good job, unable to save up the money to buy a house? So the way I see this is, sure, there are many broad national economic statistics that say the economy is getting better, and it's true that overall the economy is recovering from the terrible crash of 2008, and thank God for that. I am glad that's the case. But there have been deep structural changes in this economy, changes that have gone on for more than 30 years, changes that despite all of this movement forward have left hard-working families on the curb. Now, it wasn't always this way. When I was 12, my big brothers were all off in the military. My mother was 50 years old. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked selling carpeting. He had a heart attack, and it turned our little family upside down. The bills piled up. We lost the family station wagon. We nearly lost our home. And I remember the day that my mother, scared to death, had never worked outside the home, 50 years old, put on her best dress and her high heels and walked to the Sears to get a minimum wage job. That minimum wage job saved our home. And sure, my mother worked hard for that money. She worked really hard. But I never forget the fact that she got her job at Sears at a time when a minimum wage job could keep a family of 3 afloat. And that's what it did for our family. My daddy ended up as a maintenance man, and my mom kept working at Sears. And I made it, there was no money for me to go to college. I ended up graduating from a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. And yeah, I worked hard, but I grew up in an America that invested in kids like me, an America that built opportunities for kids to flourish in a changing world, an America where a janitor's kid could become a United States senator. That's the America I grew up in. And here's the deal. I wasn't the only one. And it wasn't just a brief period of time. For nearly half a century, coming out of the Great Depression, America built a great middle class and built opportunity unlike anything ever seen on earth. From the 1930s to the late 1970s, GDP kept going up and wages kept going up pretty much across the board. Now, let's be clear, it was not equal. White families' incomes were significantly higher than African American families, and women were paid only a fraction of what men got. But everyone's incomes were increasing. In fact, here's how it worked. 90% of America, everybody not in the top 10%, 90% of America got about 70% of all income growth in that period of time, from 1935 to 1980. Overall, as the economic pie was getting bigger, everyone was doing better. Everybody, pretty much, was getting a little bigger share. As our country got richer, our families got richer. As our families got richer, our country got richer. That is how America built a great middle class. That is how we built a country of opportunity. And then it changed. And you can look at this, the pivot point is basically about 1980. A little of it happens before, a little of it happens right after, but this is where the big pivot point comes. By 1980, wages have flattened out, but expenses keep going up. And the squeeze was terrible. By the early 2000s, adjusted for inflation, families were spending twice as much on mortgages as they had just one generation earlier. Families spent more on health insurance, more to send their kids to college. Mom and dad both went to work, but that meant new expenses like childcare, higher taxes, a second car. So people tightened their belts where they could, but it still wasn't enough. Families now go deeper into debt to pay for college, to cover serious medical problems than they ever have before. So let's go back to looking at the big picture. 1935 to 1980, the 90% of all people got, remember, the 90% got 70% of all income growth. So what happens from 1980 to 2015? Well, the first part is the good news. GDP pretty much keeps going right along. We have the dip in 2008, but it recovers. So GDP keeps going along. What happens to the 90%? How much of that income growth, that productivity growth, does the 90% get? The answer, less than 1%. 99.5% of all the income growth in America from 1980 to 2015 went to the top 10%. That's it. And just to make the point a little sharper, because of systematic racism, from 1984 to 2009, the wealth gap between black and white families tripled in that period of time. Now that is huge structural change. When I look at the data here, and this includes data that research that I conducted myself, I find evidence of the pounding that working people have been taking. Instead of building an economy for all, the past generation in this country has been about building an economy that works for some. Tens of millions of working families, the backbone of this country, are being left behind by this economy. These families are working harder than ever, but they can't possibly get ahead. Opportunity is slipping away. Too many people feel like the game is rigged against them. And here's the thing, they are right. It is rigged against them. Since the 1980s, too many people running this country have followed one form or another of supply-side or trickle-down economic theory. And when all the varnish is removed, trickle-down just means cutting brakes for the biggest corporations and for the richest people in the country, and then declaring that somehow those giant corporations and those rich people can be counted on to create an economy that will work for everyone else. Now, trickle-down may be hugely popular with giant corporations and with their lobbyists, but it's never really made any sense. I mean, just stop and take a deep breath about the basic idea behind it. George Bush Sr. is the one who referred to it as voodoo economics, and he was right. And we all need to call it out for what it is. Nothing more than helping the rich and powerful get richer and more powerful while cutting the legs out from underneath every other American family. Trickle-down policies are pretty simple. First, fire the cops. Not the cops on Main Street, but the cops on Wall Street. Pretty much the whole Republican Party, and if we're going to be honest, some of the Democratic Party as well, talk about the evils of big government, and they call for deregulation. But do understand what deregulation means in this context. What it really means is let's tie the hands of the regulators and turn loose the big banks and the international corporations to do pretty much whatever they want. Turn them loose to rig the markets and reduce the competition. Turn them loose to outsource the jobs. Turn them loose to load up on risks and then hide behind taxpayer guarantees. Turn them loose to sell mortgages and credit cards that cheat people. In short, do whatever it is. Turn them loose to do whatever they want to do to juice the short-term profits, even if it comes at the expense of hardworking families. Now, trickle-down economics has a second part to it. Part one is fire the cops, but part two is cut taxes for those at the top. Cut them when times are good, cut them when times are bad. And when that means there's less money for road repairs, less money for medical research, and so much less money for schools that our government ends up squeezing kids on student loans, then so be it. 35 years of these policies, and look at the results. The top 10% get practically all of the growth in income, and the economy just stops working for everyone else. The trickle-down experiment that started during the Reagan years failed America's middle class. Sure, the rich are doing great in this country. Giant corporations are doing great. Lobbyists are doing really great. Talk about a growth industry. But what happened to the American dream? What happened to the dream of an economy where everyone who works hard at least gets a shot at doing great? The choices made in Washington have left America's middle class in a deep, deep hole. And we just need to acknowledge what those choices are. The choice to leash up the financial cops. The choice to bail out the biggest banks with no strings attached while families suffered. The choice to starve our schools and burden our kids with billions of dollars of student loan debt at the same time that we cut taxes for billionaires. The choice to spend tax dollars to subsidize big oil instead of putting that money into rebuilding our roads and bridges and power grids. The choice to look the other way when employers quit paying overtime, misclassified workers, and just plain old stole people's wages. The choice to sign trade pacts and tax deals that benefit multinational corporations and leave American workers in the dirt. For more than 35 years, too many politicians in Washington have been making deliberate choices that favor those with money and power. And the consequence is that instead of an economy that works well for everyone, America now has an economy that works well for about 10% of the people. I'm here today and wanted to be here today because I believe it is time to fight back. I'm here because I believe it is time to make new choices, to make different choices, choices that put working people first, choices that aim toward a better future, choices that reflect our values as Americans. And I think most of these choices are pretty straightforward. I believe that it means no one should work full-time and still live in poverty, and that means raising the minimum wage. It means that no one who is trying to get an education should be crushed by student loan debt, and that means debt-free college. That's what we need. It means that after a lifetime of hard work, that people are entitled to retire with dignity, and that means protecting and expanding Social Security and Medicare. It means recognizing that diversity is our strength, not our weakness. And that means embracing the ideals that made this country great and passing meaningful immigration reform. It means that government is how we invest together in the future. And that means making sure that billionaires and giant corporations pay their fair share of taxes so that we can pay for education and infrastructure and medical research and scientific discoveries. That's how we build a future. And it means that the survival of our planet is at risk. And it is time for government, our government, to stop the subsidies for big oil companies and make the hard choices that will make us the leader around the world in reducing carbon pollution. That's how we build a future. Now look, choices like these won't be easy, but we know they are possible. We know because we have seen David beat Goliath before. We have seen the lobbyists lose. We saw it during the financial crisis when we created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect people from tricks and traps on mortgages and credit cards. We saw it when we passed health care reform. We are the ones who choose our future. I believe in an America that builds opportunities. I believe in an America that said, back when I was a girl, that a minimum wage job like the one my mother got at Sears all those years ago should pay enough to keep a family going. I believe in an America that provided a good, affordable education and opened 1 million doors for a kid like me. I believe in an America that invested in infrastructure and research and built great jobs right here in America. And I believe that we can once again grow a strong and vibrant working class, middle class here in America. I believe that we can build an America that works not just for some of our families, but that works for all of our families. And I'm counting on you for that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to do some questions? Okay, good.
I feel validated when Senator Warren says good to me. Tiziana Deering is Associate Professor in the Graduate School of Social Work here at Boston College. She is one of the co-founding directors of RISE, Research and Innovation in Social, Economic, and Environmental Equity. She is also co-director of the Center for Social Innovation in the School of Social Work. Professor Deering will serve as moderator for a brief question and answer period with the Senator. Professor Deering.
Senator, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
That was an inspiring speech.
Boy, we look like spring together between the two.
I was trying to get her to pay attention up
Even
there.
if the weather won't cooperate, we will make it be spring.
That's
okay,
right.
We're ready.
So students were very excited about you coming and had some questions ready in
Sure.
advance. I have 3 here.
Okay.
The first is, politics in the U.S. are becoming increasingly polarized. How can we best raise those issues to colleagues on the other side of the aisle? Specifically, how do we make them see that inequality leads to health disparities and that these affect us all?
So I think this is obviously a very tough question. What are we going to do about the pulling apart? You know, you hear the stories about government, that there used to be a big overlap, things you could count on kind of no matter which party you were in. Highway funding would always get done, right? Education funding would always get done. The minimum wage would get raised, sometimes a little slower, a little faster, but the minimum wage would keep coming up. We had this shared sense that what we were really building in this country was a country of opportunity. And the filter, the lens, for almost all of it, for almost everything we did, was how does it work kind of for folks in the middle? And that was a great deal also for those at the bottom because it meant creating more opportunities, more space, more more chances that you were going to have to be able to move up that ladder. That was the direction. It wasn't perfect, but that was the direction we went in. That's not the world we live in today. It's a very different political environment. The whole supply side that I was talking about, it's not just about what it has meant in terms of how we've spent our dollars, that we have deregulated Wall Street, and we all saw how that one worked out, right? Not just that we have a tax structure that's so far out of whack that giant corporations pay nothing in taxes, 2%, 4%, while little businesses that are struggling to get up and going are paying at full marginal rate, right? They're all the way up there on it. So it's not just those effects, it's what it's done to our values. It's that it's become much more about, no, we're not here to create opportunity for everyone. We're here to help those who are in our ears every day. The ones who can hire the lobbyists, the ones who can hire the lawyers, the ones who can show up day after day after day, not just in the halls of Congress, but good grief, they're in every regulatory agency. They take out ads. They're everywhere in Washington and increasingly all across this country. So the question is, how do we fight back? How do you change that? And I'll give you at least one thought about this. I was at the airport yesterday in Washington, getting ready to fly down here. And it's crowded, and the plane is an hour and a half late because the weather was bad and so on. And so this man walks up to me, and he says, somewhat belligerently, steps right in front of me, he said, we probably don't agree on much of anything. And I thought, great. Just what I needed at 7:30, and I haven't eaten. So I said, I said, that's probably right. And he said, but you're damn right about college and schools. And he said, it is not right for the federal government to make a profit off the backs of our kids over student loans. And he said, it is not right that a kid can't go to school today without taking on a huge amount of debt. And I brightened, and of course instantly said, did you know that 70% of people who graduate from college today have to borrow money to get there? Do you know what that means in a country like America, where we are just further separating people? And we're saying if you're not born into it, good luck on ever getting there. And we really got into it, but in a good, connected way. So here's my theory about one way we do this. We pick very specific things. I don't have to get into a fight with people on the other side about supply side. I mean, I can do it, and I'm ready to do it. I'm ready. But let's pick our specific things. Let's pick them, and then let's drill down on them, and let's make them central issues. And let's make them central issues of accountability. You know, everybody in here, you want to become a one-issue voter? Become a one-issue voter over whether or not people ought to be able to get a degree without getting crushed by student loan debt. You know, let's just start there and make that salient so that you ask it of every candidate, so that you talk to people and you say, maybe there are other things we can't agree on, but can we agree on that much? And find those places where we can do that. And maybe from there, we start to build some change. Because at the end of the day, I don't have to win the theoretical argument. What we've got to do is open up the opportunities again. What we've got to do is we've got to make this country work again, not just for a narrow slice at the top, but we've got to make this work for the rest of America. That's our job. And I'll start with just some concrete steps along that line. That's my best hope. Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to switch gears a little bit for the second question. This one's quite to the point, and it says, can we spend more on infrastructure than we do on the military?
Oh, God bless. So let me actually start. Whoever asked this question is already an infrastructure nerd. I have your number. Okay. I want to start with the pitch for anybody else about why infrastructure is so important. You think about the basic functions of government, right? What does government do? And to be fair, government provides for the common defense, right? That's a big part of what government does. Government puts the cops on the beat. That's what government's supposed to do. It says once we pass rules, whether it's cops on the street out there or whether it's on Wall Street. Government's job is to make sure everybody's following the rules. But what's the third thing government does? Government is the way that we invest together to be able to create more wealth and more value for all of us. You know, nobody can build the road in front of their house, hope that their neighbors will do the same, and then we'll end up with an interstate highway system. It doesn't work that way, okay? And so this really is, when you look at the data, the 1935 to 1980 data, you really do see this. America invested hugely in infrastructure, in roads, in bridges, in power grids. Why invest in power grids? The bottom line was nobody knew what the next great small business was going to be, but they were pretty darn sure they were going to need electricity. They were pretty darn sure they were going to need roads and bridges to be able to get their goods to market. And I'll tell you another part of that, because they fit together. They were pretty darn sure they were going to need an educated workforce. And so part of what we did is we made those investments together so that if you had a great idea, you get out there and try your small business, or go to work for a medium-sized company and help it be a flourishing big company. But we make those core investments. It's like plowing fields, right? You plow the field so that when you scatter the seed, it's got a chance to sprout. That's what this is all about. And this is where trickle down has nearly killed this country. Because the consequences of reducing the revenue side, of doing all those tax cuts for giant multinational corporations, for billionaires to starve on the revenue side, meant there was less and less and less money to put into transportation, less and less and less money nowadays to put into communication. Think how vital that is if you're trying to build some kind of a future. And so now we live in a world where the American Society of Civil Engineers gives America a D+. D+, we're in a college here. No greed inflation. Gives us a D+ on our infrastructure and says it's going to take more than $2 trillion to be able just to bring us to where we need to be, much less moving this thing ahead. Think about how different, right now, how different Massachusetts would look if we'd been spending money on infrastructure all along. If we had, right now, high-speed rail that went from Boston to Worcester to Springfield, if we had South Coast Rail that headed down, right, to New Bedford and Fall River, if you could get from Quincy to downtown Boston in under 15 minutes riding on the train, housing prices would be different. Does everybody understand that, right? Everything about it would be different. Locations for where pods of new businesses could grow up, new ideas, would be different. There'd be shopping, there'd be all kinds of things that would be spread throughout the state. And here's the core, there'd be more opportunity. There'd be more opportunity. If we had a T that had kept up, how many people are still driving 40-year-old cars to work? The answer is nobody, right? Nobody. They're old and they're stinky and they smell funny, right? And yet, what are we doing on the T? Because we've, well, right? If we had a T that had expanded, all the lines had been built out, and the cars were new, and they ran frequently, and they ran late at night, if we had all those things, we would have not only a different economy, we'd have a lot more opportunity. Opportunity for people who can't afford to buy a car to get started. Opportunity for people who want to try an internship somewhere that's 20 miles away. Opportunity for somebody who wants to start a business and be able to attract some BC students to come on down and help them participate in it. All of those things would be there if we have the infrastructure. And people say, oh, tax money, it's your money. You bet it's your money on tax money. I get that. But it turns out it's also your T. and it's your highway, and it's your power grid, and it's your communications infrastructure. Those are the things we own together. And when we make them work, it's not a zero-sum game. This is what opportunity is about. This is how you let that GDP keep going up and going up. We create opportunity for all of us. So, for all of us, the next time you hear infrastructure, please do not go to sleep for a tenth of a second. Say, infrastructure really matters. It's our basic investment in opportunity, and it's something we do together. And when we do it right, we all succeed. So I'm a big infrastructure gal. I mean, really, how many people have barfed on the tea? Do you ever think about that when you Oh, that's another whole story. Okay.
You want to do
Time
one
to
more?
replace those cars.
One more?
One more.
Okay, so in the New York Times, you recently wrote about the power of presidential appointments to regulatory
I did.
agencies. So how can the next Attorney General or head of the SEC fight inequality?
Oh, so that is actually a really good question. I mean, the other two were too, but these are all good questions. Okay. No, but this really is. So I want to make a point here. There's a lot of conversation about how Washington is polarized. You can't get anything through the United States Senate. Now, truth in that, right? Well, occasionally we get something through, but by and large, there's a lot of truth in that. So here's what I've discovered in the United States Senate. There is a lot you can do through the agencies that already exist. And the difference between having people run those agencies who really believe in the mission and people who don't believe in the mission is a huge difference in the outcomes, what the agencies do and how they influence the part of the economy, the part of the country that they're supposed to deal with. And let me just give you an example around this. So I'm trying to think where to start the story. So here's where to start the story. People save money for their retirement. They buy these really complicated investment devices. And that's kind of how it is. You kind of have to do that. There really are. There's a lot of complicated stuff out there. So it turns out that a lot of investment advisors put the client's interest best, and some are actually required by law to do it. But there's a loophole in the law that requires or permits some investment advisors to put their own interests first. What does that mean? It means there are good products, there are lousy products. They make more money by selling you lousy products. They get prizes and awards from the companies that want to promote those lousy products, like Super Bowl-style rings and vacations. This is no joke. Vacations at Irish castles and luxury cars by selling really awful things to people. It costs the American people about $17 billion a year, every year. Think about that, year after year after year, from investment advisors who are just putting themselves first and selling terrible stuff that people can't understand to them. So, could you fix that? Well, of course you could fix it. All you got to do is have a rule in Washington, comes out of Washington, that says you can't, it's called the fiduciary standard, you can't put your own interests ahead of the interests of your client. Doctors already have a fiduciary standard. Lawyers have a fiduciary standard. You say the same thing for financial advisors. And like I said, a whole bunch of financial advisors already work under that constraint. There are two agencies who have legal capacity to write that rule. One is the SEC, and one is the Department of Labor. For decades, we have seen this problem. And you keep identifying, keep bringing it up, you bring the stories up, somebody goes out and does a study, God bless them, brings in the information, and tries to make, it says, please do this to the SEC. And the SEC says, la, 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 I can't hear you, right? No, this would be controversial. There are big companies who come in and lobby us every single day and say they really like it is, and oh, it's just too complicated to change it. And you don't need any rules. We're already taking care of all of our customers to the tune of $17 billion for ourselves. That's what the companies had been saying. And the SEC has done squat. The Department of Labor finally looked at it and said, you know, we also have some legal jurisdiction here. So the Department of Labor stretches and scratches and puts together a rule, puts it out there, and I'm telling you, they just just about got the tar beaten out of them. All the lobbyists come down on them, rain down, oh, this is terrible, this is awful. What do? They pull back, they rewrite another proposed rule, and they bring it out again. And they get lots and lots and lots of comments from the lobbyists, but a lot of consumer groups start getting involved. There's some senators who get involved, other people who get active in this. And the Department of Labor, just this past Wednesday, came out with the final version of the rule. And it's going to take about a year or two to get the thing fully implemented, but the rule is done. And the rule will now be, in effect, that all of the investment advisors have to put the client's best interest first. That is $17 billion a year, year after year after year, that's going to stay with hardworking American families instead of being drained off to advisors who care more about themselves than they do about their customers. Now, yeah. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which we built coming out of the financial crisis. That little agency, which is responsible for just trying to level the playing field, get a little transparency on basic stuff like mortgages and credit cards and payday loans, that sort of thing, they have already forced, through enforcement actions, the largest financial institutions in this country to return $16 billion directly to people they cheated. Now, that's government that works for us. So here's my, I made this a long answer, I apologize, but let me get to the heart of it, because this is what it's really about. Yeah, it's terrific when Congress can pass good legislation. It's good when we avoid passing bad legislation. Affordable Care Act, that one has got to go through Congress. Reducing the interest rate on student loans, that one has got to go through Congress. But there is a whole lot that can be done throughout our federal government, and I can just go agency by agency by agency. And when we have someone who leads an agency that understands the mission, that they are not here to serve powerful corporations, they are not here to make the lobbyists happy, they are here to serve the interests of the American people, that's what public service is all about. That when that happens, it makes a huge difference. And I gave you 2 concrete examples. We could just keep multiplying them on through. And so here's the deal. When we think about in elections coming up in every part of this, understand, people want you to be discouraged about Washington. Oh, there's no point in getting involved in the election because after all, Senate can't do anything, the House can't do anything, it won't make any difference. Don't kid yourself. That's just another form of voter suppression. Hoping you won't care enough to go to the polls, hoping you won't care enough to volunteer, hoping you won't care enough not only to go to the polls, but drag every member of your family and your dorm mate and everyone you know and make sure they also vote. Because it matters. It matters. So, we're through. That's our 3 questions. Let me just say one more thing. There's a reason I wanted to be here today. I wanted to be here to talk to people who care about the set of issues around how we create an America that works not just for those at the top, but works for those at the bottom, works for those in the middle, that creates real opportunity over time. The bad news is there is a lot that is broken. I mean a lot. We could just keep going through this list. Infrastructure is only part of it. What's happening on research, what's happening on education. Huge, huge parts. But it also means we are now at a moment where it all comes down to this. Either this is going to stay a rigged game. We're going to be an America that's going to be fundamentally different. An America that's all about an upper class and then a long gray underclass that lives paycheck to paycheck, that barely hangs on by their fingernails. And we are at that pivot point now. We are going to make decisions, and they are political decisions, that we're going to have to make as a people about what kind of a country we're going to build going forward. So I'm here today to say, It feels good to be with people who care about this set of issues, who care about income inequality, who care about building a real future in this country, not just for some of us, but for all of us. We make each other stronger. Thank you for being here today.